Okay. Seeing no public comment, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner McNinch?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the biennial upland game release plan for fiscal years 2020 and 2021 amendment number 1 as presented.
Motion by Commissioner McNinch, seconded by Vice Chair East to approve the biennial upland game release plan for fiscal years 2020 and 2021, amendment 1 as presented. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Okay, we can then move on to agenda item 19, update on the Fallon Naval Range and Training Center and Nevada Test and Training Range. Habitat Division Administrator Alan Janae for possible action. The department will provide an update regarding the legislative environmental impact statement status and timeliness for commission consideration of congressional correspondence relative to wildlife impacts. Mr. Janae.
Thank you, Chairman Johnson. Giving an update on the Fallon Naval Air Station and Nevada Test and Training Range. As I have reported in the past, the legislative EIS process, the public input part has already passed. Where it is now is it's going to, it's basically at the congressional level. In order for those to take effect, they need to be incorporated into the National Defense Authorization Act. Just a couple weeks ago, the Senate Armed Services Committee did a markup, their markup to the National Defense Authorization Act. At that time, despite including some other withdrawals, they, for the Nevada Test and Training Range at Nellis and the Fallon Naval Air Station, they only recommended within that language the extension of the time period for the training centers. They did not authorize the expansion. There was no mention of it. So, as you recall, Fallon would have closed approximately 770,000 acres in their proposal, and Nellis would have added an additional 260,000 to their area. Neither one of those were referenced in the Senate Armed Services Committee markup. So that was kind of positive, but there is a hearing coming July 1 on the House of Representatives Armed Services Committee, and that'll be July 1, so we don't have, I haven't seen or heard much as far as the markup on that, but that was positive that the Senate did not expand, have an expansion for those two training centers. And that's my opinion at this time. Any questions?
What's the timeline now? We just don't know. We have July 1, committee hearing at the House and potential markup. We don't know what may happen during the summer months leading up to the next commission meeting in August.
Yes, Chairman, yeah, that's, you know, in their timelines when both entities, the Air Force and the Navy, were proposing their timelines, they had an expectation that defense authorization would be passed in FY20 fall or possibly early winter of 21. So beyond now and then, don't really know. The timeline isn't clear.
Did the Senate committee give any explanation as to why their markup was an extension but no expansion?
I have heard rumor, but I don't believe that there was actual true reporting on what that was and the rationale behind it. But there's been rumor though, as far as lack of involvement in conversation with committee members by the representatives of those expansions. But again, that's only rumor mill type of explanation. I haven't seen a true write-up as to committee member reports.
Okay. Any questions? Commissioner McNinch?
Mr. Chairman, is there anything the commission needs to do right now? I was kind of gung-ho out of the gate just because it seemed kind of overwhelming, but considering where we're at now, is there anything that the commission can do to support NDOW or make comment or
job, but, is those discussions and trying to make the congressional delegates aware of the values and the costs. I think many of them are up to speed on that, but I think it's, again, trying to get them to try to convey that message to the Senate arm, Forces Committee members to help in their review and wording within that Defense Authorization Act and recommendations within that.
Okay, this is an action item. Is there any public comment? Seeing no public comment, I'll bring it back to the commission. Would it be appropriate for the commission to reiterate its position that it has concerns over expansions that were proposed, that it appears that concerns may have been received but not addressed by either the Air Force or the Navy, and that until those concerns are taken into account and there's adequate consultation with Nevada's congressional delegation, the requested expansion should not occur.
I think there could be benefit to that. The timeline, I don't know that we would actually, given that it's a July 1 date, it would be a quick push trying to draft a letter, get the commission, get that letter out to be, considered and incorporated into the House discussions, but it could help in the long term.
It's Wednesday. It seems to me that the commission could perhaps ask the vice chair to draft and send a letter.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we've got a past letter. I think much of it is there. We can pull that together and work with the vice chair to try to put something out if that was the desire.
I'd be happy to address that.
Further discussion? I've said this before, it's not opposition to wanting to meet the needs of the military, but as we sit as wildlife commissioners and heard a lot of concerns expressed over these, and I would make a motion that this commission authorize Vice Chair East to draft the appropriate letter for submittal to the House Armed Services Committee before July 1, with a copy to the Nevada delegation expressing this commission's view on the Fallon Naval Range and Training Center Nevada Test and Training Range potential expansion. Commissioner Hubbs?
Just to go out there and we can read it back in, but since there was no response to our first letter that was sent to them, should there be any further input onto our second letter? Is there any legal ramification or positive maybe direct or anything like we're training from state? Our input on behalf of wildlife, and it seems to me that we're being ignored on this issue. Not that it's a major concern to our nation, I understand that, but I don't understand why is it just strictly because all land is public at this perspective, in terms of what they want to take back and use for military purposes? But there are ramifications for that, and I don't understand why it seems to me that it's being continuously ignored.
So are you saying that the letter that the commission is sending is being ignored by the delegation, by Nevada's congressional delegation, or the military branches that are looking to expand?
Well, I'm looking at who did we address our last letter to?
I thought the commission was sending letters to the delegation, but I'm seeing some positive affirmation on that. And so, I mean, there's a lot of different players. There are a lot of different players and a lot of different pieces. I don't think it would hurt, especially now that the NDAA is out, and the letter can be specific to the commission's, for example, support of the absence of expansion of lands in the National Defense Authorization Act, and an encouragement for continuance of that position from the delegation. But Nevada doesn't have any members of our delegation that hold key positions on any of those defense committees right now. But I think just knowing that the stance that they've traditionally taken is, we continue to have strong support for it. I don't think it would hurt, but I wouldn't expect to hear back unless it was just kind of a form letter, which wouldn't mean much anyway.
My question is, I think Vice Chair Johnston at that time, and I don't know if he was chairman at that time or potentially he might have been, but do you remember who you addressed our letter to?
Yeah, I thought it was the Navy and the Air Force. It was the branches of the military, and I certainly didn't expect that we would get a response to that.
Which the delegation has been CC'd on most all of our communications from the commission and from the department. They're aware of it. They're very actively watching both scenarios. I think this is another opportunity to just let them know, we still have concerns. There isn't a consensus among the proposal there, and that we would still like to see some measures incorporated for wildlife and community concerns.
Do you think any pressure on our the congressional membership for the state of Nevada or senators who are representing the state of Nevada, that it might be beneficial for our wildlife constituency to write them a letter and let them know that they're concerned at this point? Because if that's the case, and if we're really concerned about it, then potentially should we address our Congress members and senators that as wildlife constituents of the state of Nevada, we're interested in this and we're concerned? I mean, sometimes it's public pressure in and of itself that can make them more sensitive, and I don't know if all that we can unless we just want to roll over and say this is how it's going to be. But if we don't want to roll over, then we decide not to roll over and
Yes,
The delegation is very well aware, very engaged, and very supportive of our position. And so CCing them on our correspondence to the military has continued to reiterate our support for their position. And I don't see any way, shape, or form that any members of our congressional delegation would back down on this. They've done an outstanding job of staying informed and active in our best interest.
And I would add to that comment is the conservation organizations have actually been very active. But, if you remember, there was a congressional bill from our delegation pushing for a different alternative for the Nellis Range. And so, not only our enforcement but our delegation are quite involved. And I agree that probably, again, this is an opportunity to spread the word to our conservation partners and try to, work with the delegation to try to push a conversation on the opportunity within the House and the defense authorization wording.
Okay, the motion is pending. Is everyone still clear on the motion? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. We'll then move on to agenda item number 20, Commission General Regulation 485, Tag Transfer, Deference, and Return Program, LCB file number R022-19, Management Analyst Kylie Taylor for possible action. The Commission will consider adopting a regulation relating to amending Chapter 502 of the Nevada Administrative Code. This regulation would provide direction for allowing the transfer, deference, or return of tags under certain extenuating circumstances after the passage of Assembly Bill 804 of the 80th Legislative Session. Ms. Taylor.
Okay, so as you said, Chairman Johnson, this did come out of the last legislative session.
I did have in my notes that I started this last July, so come Wednesday it will have been a year for this process. This is the 5th time you guys are seeing this regulation, so I won't go into too much detail. You guys saw the write-up from LCB making all of the changes you requested in the 3rd workshop. So unless you guys have any questions, I think we should be good to move it to a vote. Are you okay? Here's the question.
No, I'm trying to secure a hat so my head doesn't burn. Any questions for Ms. Taylor? Carrie, you have a question? No. Understood. Okay.
I can also tell you guys that so far this year, we have already had 7 tags returned for medical reasons. And I know that was a major discussion during this regulation, so I did want to give you guys that update.
Thank you. Any questions before I take public comment? Any public comment on agenda item 20? Seeing no public comment, I'll bring it back to the commission.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve Commission General Regulation 485, Tag Transfer Deference and Return Program LCD file number R022-19 as presented.
Okay, motion by Commissioner McNinch, seconded by Vice Chair East to approve Commission General Regulation 485, Tag Transfer Deference and Return Program, LCD file number R022-19. Everybody clear? Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Ms. Taylor, thank you for all your work on this. I didn't think I'd see the end of it.
Thank you guys.
Maybe the sun's going to keep moving, though. Okay. With that, we'll move on to agenda item 21. Review and consideration of possible changes to waterfowl hunt zones for 2021 through 2025. Wildlife Staff Specialist Russell Wilson-Hume for possible action. The Commission will consider recommendations and may choose to provide direction to the Department on possible changes to waterfowl hunting zones. The Pacific Flyway entertains changes to waterfowl hunting zones every 5 years, and potential changes must be noticed by July 1st, 2020 to receive consideration. Any changes accepted by the Pacific Flyway will not take effect until the 2021 waterfowl seasons and will remain in effect until 2025. Mr. Wilson?
Push the button.
I don't believe there might be.
Mike, hit the mic there.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, so this came up a couple of meetings ago and then was taken back off once the pandemic overtook us. So you've seen this at least in your packet a couple of times. So I'll just be brief on my description here and then answer questions that you have. So this only comes up, this is something that we set through the federal process. It only comes up once every 5 years. During the past 5-year period, there were a couple of counties that had asked about changing zones, as well as a little bit of concern from the law enforcement division that some of the wardens, their areas were bisected by 2 different waterfowl seasons, and it was a little confusing for them when as soon as they crossed the county line which season was which. So based off of that, I took the current waterfowl season, which you have a map, the current waterfowl zones, which you have a map of, and the suggested changes, which both
took into consideration some of the county concerns as well as the concerns from law enforcement crossing boundaries between zones, and proposed that our waterfowl hunt zones mirror our regional boundaries. It seems to solve both of the problems at once, and so that's what I propose to you today. If you have any questions specific to any of that or why these changes, I'm happy to answer those.
Questions? Seeing no questions, any public comment? I don't see any public comment. I'll bring it back to the commission then. And I guess the direction that the department would be asking is that we would endorse the change by adding Lander and Eureka counties to the northeast zone.
It also includes Esmeralda and Nye being included in the south zone.
Do we need to specify that in our motion, or can we just say as presented?
I think it says presented.
Okay, then I move to adopt the waterfowl hunt zones for 2021 through 2025 as presented by the department.
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion by Vice Chair East, seconded by Commissioner Hubbs. Is everybody clear on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. We can then move on to agenda item 22, reports, informational. Agenda item 22A, Department Activity Report, Secretary Tony Wasley. Secretary Wasley will provide a report on recent department activities. And he has assured me he's going to give the most thorough department activity report in my final meeting.
That's a great idea, Chairman.
Yeah.
I was going to try to keep it brief in the interest of noise and time.
Keep in mind, I am sitting in the sun, and I've already had to put on a hat.
All right, I'll do my best. So I guess I'll start with maybe some of the obvious, some of the COVID-related issues and concerns for the department. The governor did announce here recently that state employees would be expected to furlough 1 day a month, so 12 days for FY21, which begins July 1st. That equates to somewhere in the neighborhood of a 4%, give or take, pay decrease. Also froze any merit adjustments. So many of our younger staff earlier in their careers that start relatively low typically see a 5% merit increase, assuming that they have satisfactory job progress report. So certainly a challenging issue with morale, and a lot of folks that had furloughs and merit freezes, and just recently we're just kind of climbing out of that hole or back into it. So we don't know at this point what fiscal years 22 and 23 may bring in terms of the budget. The department has been proactively looking for how we will offset the loss of our general fund programs. But we can talk about that at a time as well. We also Commissioner Hubbs brought up the issue of how we treat our wildlife with pandemics and diseases and everything else, and I had shared that I'm on weekly calls, and I have 2 or 3 calls a week with some national groups to talk about how we navigate this challenging time as it relates to people's views of wildlife. And I think there's a real risk right now that people are already beginning to verminize or demonize wildlife, bats in particular, partly due to some misconceptions about their role in COVID. I mentioned the Center for Disease Control's One Health initiative, and if anybody's interested in how that is approaching the ecosystem health and ecology, I would encourage you to look at CDC's webpage and look at the One Health initiative. There's a whole host of diseases and risks out there that the animal world poses, and whether we're talking about things as common as rabies, Ebola. Ebola started, the speculation is that a child picked up an infected bat in a backyard because that bat's native habitat was in a state of disarray, and the absence of that habitat forever changed the interaction dynamic between bats and humans. The child picked up a bat, boom, Ebola is born. Swine flu, bird flu, COVID, there are books and movies that have anticipated what we're presently faced to endure for a long period of time. And to Commissioner Hubb's question is, what does this look like going forward? And CWD has the potential to decrease participation in hunting. Hunting is how we fund conservation in this country. And if we lose hunting because we either have legitimate risks or perceived risks or otherwise that discourage people from participating, we're going to have real challenges in funding conservation. So a lot of the national efforts right now are geared towards how we shape our human-wildlife interaction, how we shape the narrative around that, and there's already a number of issues underway with the relevancy roadmap that recognized a lot of these challenges, and coronavirus and it has just kind of brought it to the forefront. But most of these issues, well, I think all of these issues are bigger than the state of Nevada. Most of them are bigger than the United States. Most of them are either continental or global issues. And so you'll hear more and see more about that, but I don't want anybody to think that the department is remiss in our responsibility to shape that narrative. You'll see messages in the Hunt book that talk about food security. In a time of pandemic, I've talked to Commissioner Barnes and some of the challenges that the livestock industry is having. I've read about the slaughter of millions and millions of hogs. Right now, the bottleneck is the processing plants. Those that have a freezer full of lean, organic, wild harvested protein aren't having as many challenges in getting meat as those who don't. So there's a whole host of messages, and we're being really adaptive in incorporating those messages into our social media platforms and elsewhere. Perhaps if it's the Commission's desire, we can speak specifically to what national efforts are occurring and what department efforts are. I will say that we have developed kind of a back-to-work plan. We had a soft opening of some of our offices this week. We have plexiglass at the counters, 6-foot spacing tape on the floors, sanitizers, hand sanitizer wipes. We've equipped all of our vehicles. We do have an opportunity for reimbursement through CARES Act and have been documenting all the COVID-19 associated purchases. In preparation of that, that might be of interest for an update on a future agenda as well. I mentioned yesterday, Deputy Director of Administrative Services, Liz O'Brien, retired. I just wanted to reiterate that in the activity report. In the game division, certainly some challenges with a stay-at-home order, especially for a lot of individuals who are independent, incredibly motivated, ambitious self-starters, to be told not to go do your job in areas that they're incredibly passionate about. We shifted a lot of the capacity to things like data entry and revision. Eastern Region biologists got into the field just in time to accomplish some rough grouse drum surveys. The drumming is the noise that when they meet their feathers and indicates breeding behavior. Most drum routes in the Eastern Region had successful detections of breeding rough grouse. Late March, 2 Rocky Mountain bighorn ewes were reported grazing with a farm flock of domestic sheep at the bottom of Harrison Pass area. Eastern Region game and habitat biologists euthanized those 2 yearling ewes that had mixed with the domestic sheep, collected samples, and sent those samples off to the lab. Eastern Region Game and Habitat Biologists been investigating observations of 3 bighorn rams in the Richmond Mountain area of 068. These rams likely dispersed from the core herd on the east side of the Sheep Creek Range. Current plan is to monitor the situation and determine the exact number of sheep that may be in the Richmond area, as well as assess any risk of contact with domestic sheep or goats. Eastern Region biologists have been investigating reports of unauthorized domestic sheep use on Forest Service lands in close proximity to occupied Rocky Mountain bighorn and mountain goat habitats in the Rubies. There's a large number of domestic sheep and goat farm flocks on private lands at the foot of the Rubies and East Humboldts, and they continue to pose a risk to long-term viability of bighorn and goats in those ranges. Game biologists in all 3 regions have been busy recovering radio collars that have accumulated on the landscape over the winter and during the fieldwork stoppage. So a lot of those collars drop off, or we have mortalities. They start sending a mortality signal, so they accumulated during the stay-at-home order. Related to multiple studies, monitoring efforts for multiple species across the state. Game Division personnel have been responding to numerous bear complaints in many parts of the state. Had some interesting bear observations in several unusual places, including Spring Creek, Carlin, Via, and Kings River Valley. Game biologists took advantage of the inability to conduct field work and have been working on many things they don't typically have time to focus on, including reviewing scientific literature, organizing databases, and catching up on reports and data analysis. Biologists have also used the opportunity to complete both mandatory state employee training as well as special trainings offered through webinar platforms such as BLM hosted fire training and wet meadow restorations. Hunter inquiries have started to pick up following the completion of the draw. With the office closures, the biologists are now processing the inquiries that have piled up due to the inability of staff to access the state phone system on a regular basis. Game Division personnel have been participating in weekly video conference meetings discussing game corridor mapping challenges and opportunities. It's been hosted by the University of Wyoming's Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit. The purpose of the meetings is to provide agency representatives with a platform to discuss various techniques for mapping migration corridors, ask questions, and provide progress updates. Department personnel, in cooperation with Department of Ag, are continuing to monitor the spread of the rabbit hemorrhagic disease virus. The virus is now in a border county in San Bernardino, California, and inches closer to Clark County. We did hear from Staff Specialist Espinoza, I believe, that we had a cottontail, I think in Boulder City, that was confirmed positive. Several meetings have been held to discuss how we move forward if the need arises, to coordinate with Department of Ag about potential feral rabbit removals in several parks around Las Vegas. Final version of the bat risk assessment is out and shows estimated substantial risk to bat species of North America. The risks can be mostly mitigated by the use of proper personal protective equipment, including N95 masks. That risk is coronavirus. So there's a whole suite of coronaviruses that have evolved on various bat species. It's one of the challenges with coronaviruses, relatively resistant to fevers because having evolved on bats, bats have highly variable body temperatures, which makes that virus pretty resistant to some of the elevated temperatures. But it's really important to point out that the risk relative to bats is not of bats transmitting to humans, it's humans transmitting to bats, where bats could be a reservoir for the coronavirus and also would likely suffer significant losses. The Habitat Division, Department department's special reserve account projects have been evaluated here and approved. Duck Stamp, Heritage. This year, there was a total of 43 projects seeking approximately $1.75 million in funding. 6 duck stamp applications totaled $50,000. An additional $109,000 in other matching funds supported those applications. 15 upland game bird stamp applications totaling $265,000, with an additional $1.7 in other matching funds supporting those applications. 22 heritage proposals totaling $1.4 million were received, with an additional $6.5 million in other matching funds supporting those applications. So huge dollar amount, diversity of projects, and certainly appreciate the Commission's review and approval of those. Nevada Native Seed Partnership finalized a native seed strategy focused on increasing the availability and use of native seed for rehab, reclamation, and restoration. Water Development Program engaging volunteer sportsmen to help with guzzler inspections over the coming months. Many volunteers are participating in outdoor social distancing when camping, hiking, or scouting for upcoming hunts. So many of these trips are including visits to water development projects. The department setting up a process by which volunteers can share information regarding maintenance issues at guzzlers. Time or miles spent accessing the guzzlers for inspections can also be counted as in-kind match for the water development grant, and will help offset the loss of in-kind match traditionally gained at large volunteer projects that have been canceled due to COVID precautions. The first quarter of this year, the technical review program spent significant time assessing implications of proposed changes to NEPA, under which the department provides significant feedback in coordination with federal partners on public lands, projects that are impacting wildlife across the state. Additionally, we've reviewed many BLM projects, including their grazing regulation changes, categorical exclusion for range restoration and habitat improvement, and the Yellow Pine Solar Project in Clark County, and the fuels reduction and range restoration programmatic EIS. Conservation education, Con Ed programming has had to make a huge pivot to continue to offer educational programming to our constituents and keep them engaged in wildlife. To accomplish this, our educators worked fast to learn as much as they could and prepare online webinar programs. These programs have covered all sorts of different topics, from hunting and fishing to birding, reptiles, and coyotes. Conservation educators have been facilitating these programs since early April and have hosted 44 programs to an audience of over 3,200 people. In addition to offering live webinar programs, we also record these programs and post them on our YouTube channel. Our webinar playlist currently has 12 videos available with more than 1,900 views. With this new way of facilitating programming, our audiences are giving us some great feedback and are liking the format. We're also planning on incorporating the format into classroom programming for the 2020 and 2021 school year. Promoted 2 campaigns, including 30-second videos in the southern and northern regions, encouraging people to find their staycation and discover Nevada's fishing. The 2020 Big Game Hunting Guide, I believe, went to the printers this week and will be at vendors and offices beginning the first week of July is the target date on that. Staff is working with our vendor to create a user-friendly, more accessible website that matches the branding of the agency's licensing site. Been a long overdue, much needed overhaul of the agency's website. The new website aims to make purchasing licenses a more seamless process and allow users to find information regarding conservation and wildlife. Hunter Ed staff converted the annual antelope hunting seminar that we spoke of yesterday into a virtual formatted webinar. The date for this year's seminar is scheduled for July 8th, and the department will have education staff, game biologists, as well as a local meat processor present and mediate the chat online. In early May, the department announced on social media that the big game draw results would be posted around midnight. The campaign was called Midnight Madness, and the Facebook post alone reached nearly 100,000 people and received more than 300 comments and 700 shares. Staff worked on a press release with other agencies in Tahoe Basin encouraging visitors and residents to be responsible in bear country. The release resulted in stories in multiple Tahoe Basin and Western Nevada newspapers, including Carson Now, Sierra Sun, South Tahoe Now. The Diversity Division, previously unknown cave was discovered in the Money Mountains and anonymously reported to the department. Wildlife diversity biologists visited the cave in January and realized the cave had major significance because it contained intact pre-Columbian Anasazi Indian artifacts, had significant and possibly undescribed geologic cave formations, including crystals and massive translucent gypsum deposits, and has a large roosting colony of California leaf-nosed bats. After visiting the cave, the department reported the site to the BLM and began working with paleontologists, archaeologists, and a BLM law enforcement specialist to protect the artifacts and secure the cave. This past March, the cultural artifacts on the surface within the cave were removed, transferred to the Las Vegas Natural History Museum. In May, a bat gate was constructed and installed over 3 days with funding from Nevada BLM. The bat gate design includes removable bars for future access, surveys, and research. The discovery of this cave marks only the 4th known roost site for this uncommon bat species in southern Nevada. Public alerted the department of a bald eagle nest that had been blown out of its tree during a recent windstorm. We responded over the Memorial Day weekend, found one dead nestling as well as a healthy nestling that had survived the fall. Agency staff constructed a makeshift nest, replaced that nestling in the nest, which has since fledged and is doing great. Diversity Division initiated revision of the Nevada Wildlife Action Plan. The plan is required to be updated every 10 years and will be due in December of 2022. Wildlife Diversity has been working with state parks and Fish and Wildlife Service on an upcoming environmental assessment for the Rafter 7 Ranch here at the Walker River State Rec area. State Parks is looking to implement and develop plans to turn Rafter 7 into a publicly accessible state park. There's federally threatened yellow-billed cuckoos that have been found at the ranch. Wildlife Diversity is providing data, survey time, and technical expertise to ensure that plans avoid impacts to the cuckoos and their habitat. Together with Fisheries Division, and several partners, Diversity staff's been working to develop a COVID-19 mitigation plan for the annual Columbia spotted frog surveys. Surveys that occurred over the last 17 years provide invaluable data that is used to continue to keep Columbian spotted frogs off the endangered species list. Recently, Wildlife Diversity staff were able to initiate late breeding surveys for southwestern willow flycatchers. Multiple territories and several nests have been identified. Fisheries Division, I think the biggest thing going on in fisheries relates to the Marlette Lake spawning effort. It's been a huge success. Approximately 270,000 Tahoe strain rainbow trout eggs have been collected, and 138,000 cut bow and bow cut eggs have been collected. Because of the logistical problems related to COVID-19, we were unable to produce the triploids, which are the sterile rainbow eggs at the spawning station, but we can obtain those from the Ennis National Fish Hatchery in Montana. Southern staff, fishery staff, working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to develop a project that will captively produce the endangered Moapa dace at Lake Mead Hatchery for release back into the wild in the upper Muddy River. Eastern Region staff continuing to work with Nevada Gold Mines, Fish and Wildlife Service, and other partners to finalize a conservation plan for the Johnson Springs wetland complex that would be significantly impacted by the Long Canyon Mine Phase 2 expansion. There's relic dace in the wetlands, and they've been petitioned for ESA listing by a third party. Continuing to work with the states of Idaho, Oregon, and Washington and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to develop a revised special 4D rule for threatened bull trout. 4D rule is what allows us to fish for those species, primarily in the Jarbidge River. This will assist us in developing future management actions and angling regulations. Data technology services. I think the biggest thing going on there, administering the draw, the second chance draw, and beginning to open offices. A lot of the challenges have been with customer service, the counter staff, and ensuring that we have all the precautions in place to protect employees, co-workers, as well as customers, and ensuring those customers feel safe when conducting business at those offices. I think a lot of this was we talked about yesterday with the implementation of the tag return process. Also new this year was the implementation of the Resource Fund donation, previously known as the Resource Enhancement Stamps, as a new feature to the storefront. The $10 donation option presented at customers' checkout has collected over $800,000 since it went live in March. The department has seen an increase in sales across all products during the COVID crisis. Hunting licenses have increased 10%, with combo licenses up another 10%. Fishing license sales are up 52%, and boat registrations are up almost 7%. Law Enforcement Division, with boating season activity increasing, law enforcement officers have been busy with boating patrols, including one boating operating under the influence arrest, boating accident with a laceration injury. There was another boating accident due to weather conditions where the boat grounded and swamped, and all of that occurred on Lahontan. Southern Region Wardens assisted in a multi-person water rescue. Some individuals were on a nearby reef. Others were on the shoreline. A 3-year-old girl was trapped under a vessel, bringing the total to 15 persons rescued. Wardens also responded to and assisted with a stranded vessel near Middle Point on Lake Mead. Southern Region Game Wardens identified an individual on a pool float with no protective flotation device. Who was past the no-wake zone buoys on Boulder Beach, panicked, struggled, and had known medical issues. A number of life savings on that water. So over Memorial Day weekend, Game Wardens patrolled Nevada waters with the following interactions. 230 vessels contacted, 64 fishermen contacted, 35 vessels rescued, 67 citations issued, and 190 warnings issued. Southern Region Game Warden responded to a call regarding a deer stuck in a fence. The warden remedied the situation with no injury to the animal. 9 Southern Region Wardens were involved in the service call, response, identification, scene, security, and ultimate transportation for a double homicide-suicide event. While investigating residency cases, 2 citations have been issued, one to a California man, one to an Oregon man for residency fraud. Another felony-level residency case in Elko County was settled, where a Utah resident pled guilty to misdemeanors that involved providing false information to obtain tag. The individual was fined $3,000 and forfeited the harvested animal. Game warden investigators were involved with a search warrant, follow-up investigation for a big game poaching case. Trapping violations are investigated in Esmeralda County, and reports are being submitted to the district attorney. Over 20 game wardens participated in the manhunt and crime scene security of the killing of Nevada Highway Patrol Sergeant Ben Jenkins. Department personnel were in charge of various parts of the incident, including searching for the suspect at large, incident command of certain roadblocks,
command of residences that were sealed prior to administering a search warrant, sealing a large number of crime scenes, and the escort of Sergeant Jenkins to and from the medical examiner's office in Las Vegas. 7 Eastern Region Game Wardens assisted in overwatch duty for Sergeant Jenkins' family residence. He was a close supporter of the department. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll conclude the department activity report. I certainly could have gone longer. I appreciate you accommodating that. And if there's any questions on those or any of the unreported items, I'm happy to try to answer them. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Director Wasley. Any questions? Commissioner McNinch?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tony, could you give us a 30,000-foot level update on Recovering America's Wildlife Act and the relevancy stuff that you and staff have been so involved in?
You bet. I got notice yesterday upon driving home that Speaker Pelosi's staff we'll know a lot more on Monday, but Recovering America's Wildlife Act is alive and well and may be scheduled for some action in the House as soon as Monday. Specifically what that action is or what it looks like, we don't know. Presently, the match requirement for that, as it existed, it would bring about $31 million to the state of Nevada for conservation, but would require a 3-to-1 match, just like Pittman Robertson and Dingle Johnson. The current version of that waives that match requirement. And so it would be a whole lot more beneficial and easier to use if there is, in fact, some action on that. But we'll know more on Monday.
So it almost sounds like it's maybe this is one thing that's possible.
Yeah, that's the way the conversation around it has shifted to one of economic stimulation and jobs, and so I think that's been a strategic benefit, and we'll see what happens this next week. As far as the relevancy goes, the relevancy roadmap continues. Implementation of that roadmap still front and center in a lot of discussions. The Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies is undertaking an effort with some academic universities looking for ways to facilitate implementation, and some of those barriers identified in that are more relevant now than they've ever been with some of the items that Commissioner Hutch mentioned and brought up earlier.
Any other questions? Thank you, Director Wasley. Move on to agenda item 22B, litigation report, Senior Deputy Attorney General Craig Burkett. Mr. Burkett.
So I am Craig Burkett, your Deputy Attorney General. Tip of the cap, pun intended, to Chairman Johnston. This will be very brief.
Get a little closer, Craig. Closer.
I just gotta get closer.
Closer and green.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry. So, the only thing I have to add to your litigation report is item number...
Right into the mic, please.
Got it. Is item number 7. It's the last item on your litigation report. I'm sure you all reviewed it extensively. But we have since getting that report, filed 2 motions to dismiss the case involving claims against the Department of Wildlife and multiple employees by a gentleman by the name of Mark Smith. These are defamation claims against the department. We have filed a motion for summary judgment seeking dismissal of that case, as well as a motion to dismiss the case as sanctioned for discovery abuses in that case. We expect oppositions being due next Thursday. We will have those motions filed submitted to the court by middle of July, early middle of July, to allow for those motions to be properly heard by the court. We have moved the trial date, which was scheduled for August 10. We asked for another trial date. We wanted the court to properly hear those and give enough time for the court to hopefully rule in our favor and avoid a trial, but if not, at least pare down the lawsuit. So the court said it will not give us a trial date. This is 2nd Judicial District Court, Washoe County. It will not give us another trial date until 2021. So that case will not be heard until sometime next year. But obviously we're hoping it'll not be tried. That's the only update I have for you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, we can then move on to committee reports. Agenda item 23. 23A, Finance Committee Report. Committee Chairman Gil Yannick. Informational, the Commission will hear a report on the committee's recent meeting.
The meeting of the Finance Committee was
Okay,
held on...
hey Gil, you got to speak right into the mic and really loud, and that way everybody can hear you.
Thank you. A meeting of the Finance Committee was held at 9 a.m. May 13th, 2020 via Zoom. The committee members present were myself, Commissioner Johnston, and Paul Dixon representing Clark County Advisory Board. NDOW staff in attendance was Deputy Director Liz O'Brien, Deputy Director Jack Robb, ASO Katie Jennison, and Budget Analyst Nancy Camarena. There was no public present. First item was a call to order and a roll call. The approval of the agenda. Chairman Yannick and Member Johnson made a motion to approve the agenda as submitted. The motion was seconded by Member Dixon. The motion passed unanimously. Item number 3 was the approval of the May 19th, 2019 minutes. Again, there was no public comment made. There were no comments or correction to the minutes, and a motion was made by Member Johnston to approve the minutes as submitted. The motion was seconded by Member Dixon, and the motion passed unanimously. Member items, there were no member items. The state fiscal year 2020 budget request. Members of the Finance Committee reviewed data submitted by the department's analyst, Nancy Camarena. A discussion ensued regarding comments from the various county advisory boards regarding the process of generating their budgets. There being no further discussion, a motion was made by Chair Yannick to approve the CAB budget request recommendation to the Wildlife Commission in the amount of $36,526. Turn the page. The motion was seconded by Member Dixon. The motion passed unanimously, and there was no public comment. Regarding future committee meetings, no future committee meetings were set at this time. Public comment period, there was no public comment. Chair Yannick expressed his appreciation to the members of the Finance Committee for the time and effort to review the various documents, and he expressed his appreciation to Deputy Director O'Brien, ASO Katie Jameson, and Budget Analyst Nancy Camarena for the tremendous effort put forth to assemble the County Advisory Board budget submittals. One thing I want to add, people are getting much better at putting their budgets together. I think everybody's jumped on board and feel comfortable with the spreadsheets, and the information was delivered to us on time that allowed us to keep the schedule that we had recommended. So there being no further public comment, Chair Yannick made a motion to adjourn. The motion was seconded by Member Dixon and passed unanimously, and the meeting was adjourned at 9:45.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on then to, thank you, Mr. Yannick, for that thorough summary. We'll move on to agenda item 23B then, the fiscal year 2021 County Advisory Board budget requests. Committee Chairman Gil Yannick, for possible action, the commission may approve and estimate it. Hey, Gil, you're not done. Yeah. You just gave the report. Now we got an action item.
You do got an action item.
All right. Now I got to start over.
Okay.
Committee, agenda item 23B, fiscal year 2021 County Advisory Board budget request. Committee Chairman Gil Yannick for possible action. The commission may approve an estimated amount of $36,526 to be added to the reported cash balance on hand for county advisory boards as requested to manage wildlife budgets for fiscal year 2021. Everybody got the support material with the requested budgets and the reported cash balance. Mr. Yannick?
Yes. The numbers that we put together were in line with what the committee felt was appropriate for the various counties, and the total amount of $36,526 is the amount being requested.
Any questions? Seeing no questions, any public comment? Seeing none, I bring it back to the commission, and I would move that we approve the fiscal year 2021 NDOW CAB budget request as presented. Motion made by Chairman Johnston, seconded by Commissioner McNinch. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0 with Commissioner Hubbs and Cavilla absent. I just want to thank Gil for your work on this committee. It moves very quickly because of the amount of work he does in advance and in working with the various cabs to get their budgets together. And I encourage anyone, if you're looking for a committee assignment, the Finance Committee is golden. One meeting a year. Mr. Yannick takes care of everything. You review all the paperwork. You're in and out in about 15-20 minutes. So I want to thank you all for your hard work. Because I think I was on the Finance Committee before I got on the commission.
Right.
But yeah, so anyway, thank you for everything.
Thank you. Everybody cooperated, and it all got taken care of. Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move on to agenda item 23C, Landowner Compensation Tag Committee Report. Eastern Region Supervising Game Biologist Tom Donham. Nope, let's correct that. Mike Scott. I see coming up to the table for possible action. Report will be provided on the committee's recent meeting held on January 24th, 2020. The commission may take action to modify or endorse the protocol the department will use in conducting counts for the Landowner Compensation Tag Program. Mr. Scott?
Chairman Johnston, members of the commission, for the record, Mike Scott. The last meeting, as Chairman Johnston indicated, was January 24th. We were supposed to have this on the March agenda, I believe, which was delayed until now. The Landowner Compensation Tag Committee, there's been two focuses of it. The initial focus was to find an equitable way to reduce tags to landowners if we bumped up against the 2.5% cap. To my knowledge, that has not been returned to us from LCB yet, so we're still waiting on that. The second focus of the committee was to provide direction to the department and our landowner tag biologists to come up with a protocol that would allow them to build consistency between the regions, where if a landowner has properties in that are either separated in one unit or separated and in adjacent units, that we would find a way to either combine those counts or have them sign separate cooperative agreements for different counts. The main reason for that we would separate those counts would be if there was a timing issue. In other words, if a landowner had property in one unit and wanted it counted in April, and had property in another unit and wanted it counted in December, those would not qualify to be combined. We would have them sign two separate cooperative agreements and not combine those. If they chose to have their property counted at the same time, regardless of if it's in adjacent units or separated, we would allow them to combine those. And all we're looking for now, I guess, is approval from the commission to say that that would be the protocol that we would use.
And I'll just add, as part of the Landowner Compensation Tag Committee, it was a relatively short meeting when this protocol was discussed. We thought it was very straightforward, understandable, documented in writing, addressed some of the concerns we heard from the public regarding how this is done and is there the same methods being used. It addressed also landowners' requests to have some flexibility depending upon their unique needs. And correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Valentine and others who were on that committee, it was very bought into very quickly. I thank Mr. Scott, Mr. Donham for doing that and bringing it to. So that's where it came about. It just got delayed in terms of the timing from when the committee met to when it got before this commission. So it is an action item. Do we have any public comment? Seeing no public comment, I'll bring it back to the commission, and I would just move to approve the landowner compensation tag protocol, single landowner with multiple enrolled properties as presented. Okay, motion by Chairman Johnston, seconded by Commissioner Barnes. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 8-0. I guess that's left to the decision of the future chairman, but that really completed the work of the Landowner Compensation Tag Committee. Does anyone mind if we take a quick break? Okay, I just know that the next agenda item and agenda item number 24 may take some time, so I want to take a break, come back, and hopefully I'll wrap up the rest of the agenda items without another break. So.